Chof Aleph Amud Beis, 2 lines from the top, the beginning of the Gemara. We learned in the Mishnah that if there's roik that's found in Shalim, that normally we'd assume it to be tor, except what's found in the Shuk HaElyon, the upper marketplace. Now, why is that so? Rabbi Yishu ben Levi, he said that Kotzer shall Nochrim HaYisha. Now, even though they weren't geyser on roik in Yerushalayim, they weren't geyser that the roik should be Tomei, that it's from a Zav. However, in that Shuk HaElyon, they were geyser because there was Kotzer shall Nochrim HaYisham. There was a laundry that was operated by Goyim, and the roik, the Rabbanim were geyser on the roik, on the spit of a goy. They were geyser on a nochri that he has a din of a zav, even though with the raisa there's no din of zav, but they were geyser on a nochri, and since they were nochrim over there, the roik, the saliva that's found there is presumed to come from the nochri, which they're geyser and tuma derabanan. That's why specifically over there was tuma, but generally speaking, where there weren't nochrim, they weren't geyser tuma in Yerushalayim. Amar Rav Chanina, he says a different shot. He says, he said they would kill the donkeys over there. They used to kill the donkeys there. They fed the meat to other animals, to wild animals. So they used to be noicheret over there. It has a din of an avela, and therefore, since the nochrim were over there, the saliva that was found, the roik over there, was presumed to come from these nochrim, and therefore it is tomei. So now we were discussing this in this case over here, where they had the butchers over there, and they were noicher the donkeys. So now we're coming going on a tangent somewhat to discuss the din of the blood of a nevela. These donkeys that were killed with nechira, they had a din of a nevela. So what is the din of the blood of the dam from such a case, from the animals that are nevelas? It was once a Maisa that they were killing these wild donkeys to feed it to the lions and the kings by his army. And when the oil regalim came up to the Yerushalayim, they used to pass through this area and walk through the blood up into their knees. There was so much blood. And the Maisa came in front of the Chachamim, so the Shaila was, were they Tomei or not? And they didn't say anything. They didn't require them to be matar themselves, and they didn't refrain them from coming to the Beis HaMikdash. So we see from over here that the blood of a nevela is not matameh. So this is the discussion that the Gemara is now going to have. Rabbi Simon b'shem Rabbi Yishu ben Levi, he said, Maisa b'peridosh beis Rabbi Shemesa. There is a Maisa with the donkey, the mule of Rabbi's house that died with tiru estamem mishum nevela, and they said, similar to what we just learned, that the dam, the blood, is not matam mishum nevela. The basa, the flesh of a nevela, of an animal dies without shlita, is matama. The bones are not. The shaila is, there's a machlokes as far as the dam. Do we consider the blood to be like the flesh, or do we consider the blood to be like the bones and the hoofs? And we see over here that he considers the dam, he considers it to be not like the flesh, and it's not matama. Rabbi Elazar shoel Rabbi Simon, so he asked Rabbi Simon ad kama. Well, how much blood is that? Is that because there's no shear of the dam that it was tohar, or is it that the dam is not matama at all? What is the shear that's involved here? V'lo agiv, and he didn't answer. Shol Rabbi Yishu ben Levi. So then he asked, Rabbi Elazar asked Rabbi Yishu ben Levi, Omrele, he said, ad revius tor. He said it's tor. It's only until the shear of a revius. But if there would be a revius or more, then it would be Tomei. Yoser Mikan, Tomei, more than that is Tomei. Now, the blood that is revius, if it coagulates and it's turned to a more of a solid form, then it has the appearance of flesh. More than a revius or more of blood that's left to coagulate will be now reduced in size. It'll be a size of a kazayas. the midaraisa, the tumah of the basar, it's metame than avela bekazayis. So if you have that much blood that would be reduced in size to a kazayas when it's coagulated, that it could be therefore confused with the basar, so there was a din, there were geyser tumah on it. So and Rabbi Lazar was upset, Rabbi Simon, that he didn't answer him when he asked this question about what the shear of the dam is. That's metamim. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi was sitting and he related over this Maisa. He said to him, again, it said with the blood that it's tore, that was this Maisa with the blood of the donkey of the base Rabbi, the blood is tore. What is the shear? So he said, Aravias tor, Yosemikan, Tome. He said, until the Ravias is tor, but more than that is Tome. But Ravivi didn't respond, and he literally means he kicked him, but he treated him somewhat disrespectfully, without the proper cover. Amalei Rabbi Zrika said, begin the Havisholech. He asked you a question. Because he asked a question, you treat him that way? Omrele, no, it's not because he asked a question. So he excused himself. He said, Omrele, begin the loyhava as night to be. He said, because I was preoccupied, my mind was not settled, and therefore I was distracted, and therefore I didn't give him the proper cover. Why is that? The Amar Rabbi Chanan says, it says in the Teichachav, it says that your life will hang in the balance. You won't have security. You won't feel secure. So what's it referring to? Is it's a person that doesn't feel secure in his parnasa and his livelihood, and he doesn't have land, and he has to buy wheat every year to sustain himself. And it says that you'll be afraid at the night and day. That who doesn't have land, he doesn't even have much money, and he has to buy grain from the merchants in small quantities. He can't buy enough for the whole year. He doesn't have a land, he doesn't have enough money to buy and store, he has to buy bit by bit. And you won't have security, and you won't have a sure of your life. That has to buy bread, he doesn't have enough for the next day. He has to buy every day, he has to buy the bread that he needs for that day. So he doesn't have the security and the tranquility because he's always worried about his source of food. And he said that he has to rely on the baker, so he doesn't have the security, and he became distracted, and that's why he did not give him the proper cover. But in any event, my kedayin, what is the halacha? What do we learn out from as far as the blood on the vela? Hey, Rabbi Yeshua ben B'Saira al dam nevela shu tor. He paskin that it's completely tor l'chayra. L'chayra, that means it's a tor. We are assuming that means that it's tor even if it's more than revias. Where it says no, it's not a proof, it's not a rhyme. My tor, when he says it's tor, and even though he said it unequivocally. But when he says my Torah, it means Torah malahachsher. It means Torah from being machsher. It doesn't mean from the din of tumah. It means even though for a food to become tumah, it has to come into contact with one of the liquids, one of the 7 mashkim of the liquid, and dam is considered one of them, and therefore it makes the food susceptible to be makabel tumah. But the dam of the nevela is not machshir. That's not called a mashka. As far as this halacha is concerned, it's not considered a mashka, and it's not machshir. Where it says no, taman tanina, but we learned in the Mishnah in Machshirin, dam hasheretz kivsar, that the blood of a sheretz has a din of like the basar, like the flesh. Mitama ve'ena machshir. It's mitama and it's not machshir. So that's the blood of a sheretz. Mitama ve'ena machshir. And it says ve'en lana ki yitzabay, and there's nothing else like that. This is unique. We don't have another case like that. So doesn't that imply that in other cases we don't treat the blood like the flesh? Then doesn't that mean that the blood of an avela is not metama. The boss or the flesh is metama, but the blood is not. So don't we have a raya from there? The Gemara says no. What it means that there's nothing else like this, it doesn't mean that there's no other case where the blood is metama, that it's metama. That's not what it means. Other cases, and in fact, perhaps by the nevela, the blood is metama. What does it mean? Kashir tumasa. It's not metama kashir tumasa. Meaning, we have by the dam of the sherets, the creature, the creeping creature, the sherets, is metama with a shear of an adash of a lentil. And similarly, the blood is metama kivasora, in the same shear. But in other cases, it's not. So the nevela, perhaps I'll tell you, the nevela, the basar of the nevela is metama because the blood is not metama like the basar, it's metama, but not like the basar. The dam is matama with the shear of ravias. So it's matama, but not with the same shear. That's what it means. It means but the dam is matama like the bosa. It just means that it's not matama to the same shear. So therefore, when it says before, and it says previously, we learned that dam nevela shu tor. What it means, Torah, it doesn't mean Lagami the din of Tuma, it means Lagami the din of Hechsher Machshirin. That's not Machshir. Amr Yasi, Pligi Batre, Marayan, Torah, argue on the matter. Chad Amar Tome, one says that the blood on the veil is Tome. And Chad Amar Torah, and the other one says that it's Torah. Man Amar Tome, Rav Yehuda. The one that says that it's Tome goes with the Shita of Rav Yehuda, who is paskin that way in the Mishnah in 80 years, like Beis Hillel, that the blood of an avil is Tomei. Uman Damar Torah can Rishuv Ben B'Seira, was like the sheet of Rishuv Ben B'Seira, which we just learned. Amarle Rabbi Abduma Damin Nechusa, he said V'yes, and he says that it's correct to say that Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's Tomei when there is a Ravias or more. That's when it's Tomei. But less than a Ravias is Torah. The Rabbi Yehuda Marvana the Benasiyam, because Rabbi Yehuda was a paisek for the base Rebbe for the house of the Nasi. And we had learned before that Maisa, where they had the donkey that died, that they said the blood was tar. Now, Rabbi Yehuda was a paisek. So, and Rabbi Yehuda himself says, Tomei. Must be the Rabbi Yehuda says, more the Ravias or more is Tomei. Less than a Ravias, he's minded that less than a Ravias is Tar. And that Maisa, when he said it was Tar, he was referring to less than a Ravias. So the Mishnah continued to say, Kol HaRaikim, all of the Raik that you found is Tahar except for what's in the Shekalim. So, so didn't we say that there weren't geyser on Reikin Shalim? So why is the Shukah Elyon? Why is it Tomei? So Allah, because Mora says, so we said on that Rabbi Avi and B'Shem Rishu ben Levi, and there was a laundry of Nachrim there, and that's why over there they were geyser, because the Reich is deemed to come from the Nachri, and Nachri have a din of Ezav. The Rabbanan were geyser on a Nachri, they have a din of Ezav. So it says B'Shar Yemaisa Shona. So it says that the rest of the year, that B'Shar Yemaisa Shona, it says it makes a distinction between that what's in the middle of the road and what's found on the side of the road. So B'Shar Yemaisa Shona, when it's not the regular, Hatamei Ma'alchim Shibaylas. People are Tomei walk in the middle of the road. Meaning whatever the roiv is, they have the rights, the greater rights. So therefore, the roiv, if they're Tomei, they have the use of the road. The middle of the road, they don't have to go to the side. It's most of the people are Tomei, and the use is deemed to be a use that's for most of the way that most people would use it. Most people are Tomei, they have the right to use the middle of the road. And the people who are Torah, who didn't want to be Mu'urav and come into contact with the people who are Tomei, they wanted to say Torah, they went to the side. That was up to them, their responsibility to move away. The people who are Tomei walk without declaring that they're Tomei. It's presumed to be Tomei. But the Tayim will walk on the side, call out to them, say, stay away from us. We want to remain Tar. B'shas regal, at the time of the regal, it's the opposite. At the Tayim Malkum Shiboilas, the Tayim walk in the middle of the road because most people are deemed to be Tar at the time of the regal. So they have the right of way. They walk in the middle of the road. Atmei Malkum and Etzah, those are Atami, they go to the Tzad. Atayim Malkum Stam, those who are Tar walk without declaring. And V'atmeim Im Lahen Praishu, the ones who are Tomei say to them that keep away from us. The Kola Kelim Soim, that Kelim that are found in Yerushalayim, if it's on the road that leads to the mikveh, then they're Tomei. If it's the road that leads away from the mikveh, then it's Tahar. So, fact the Gemara, didn't he say that they were not Geyser Tumah on the Kelim Yerushalayim? So why do we say that the path that leads to the mikveh, that if it's found there, Kelim that are found there are deemed to be Tomei? More answers, since it's found on the road that leads to the mikveh, that's Mechiach, that shows you, that demonstrates that they were bringing it down. Why were they bringing that road? To be toivel, to take it to the mikveh, so it shows that it was Tomei. Avashol hayakara aisan tzipoirin. So it says that the Mishnah said that any of the kelim that you find, if it's not on the path that leads to the mikveh, are deemed to be tor. There weren't geyser tumah on kelim Yerushalayim, except it said that if you have the kelim that are used for digging up the bones, and it says one of them is a hammer, which calls a maritza. But Abashol hayakaraisa tziporn, he called this hammer a tziporn, a nail, literally a fingernail. So Man Damer Tziporn, the one who says it was called Tziporn, Shaydam Tziporn, because it looked like a fingernail, meaning it was pointed at the end. At the tip of it was pointed. Man Damer Maritza, the one who says that it was called a Maritza, he said, why was it called a Maritza? Because Shemaritza is having the base ha-kvoras, because it's the Maritza would crush, it's a crusher, the hammer would crush any stone that was in the base of Kforas. When they were digging up the grave, it would crush any stone that was uncovered in the base of Kforas. So the Mishnah continued. The Sefer the Mishnah said that if you find a knife tied to a kupitz, to a chopper, a meat cleaver. So now the Mishnah said there's a different din of the status of a knife. In certain cases, the knife is deemed to be tor, and the kupitz is deemed to be tomei. However, if they're tied together, then we give the kupitz the same din as the knife. If the knife would be deemed to be tahor, well, if he tied the kupitz to the knife, that shows that it's also tahor. He's tying it together. That means that he is giving it the same status, and he's using it in the same way, and therefore they're both deemed to be tahor. But the Brisa learned, the Brisa learned opposite. A sakin kshurala, if the knife is tied to the kupitz, harei kamaisa, opposite. We give the knife the din of the kupitz. The kupitz is deemed to be tomei, so therefore the knife that's tied to it in this case is also deemed to be tomei. Zok the Mishnah. If the pareches became tomei through a valada tuma, the pareches that the pareches we're dealing over here is the pareches that was used to separate between the kodesh and kodesh kadoshim. The pareches has a din of a kli, and a kli is not makabel tuma from a vlada tuma midaraisa. Midaraisa is not makabel tuma from a vlada tuma, only from an ava tuma. But if there's pareches, then in the base of mikdash, it came into contact with a vlada tuma, so the rabbanim were geyser on it a tuma, so therefore you had to be toivelet. Now, if something is tomei midaraisa, you have to be toivelet, but it doesn't become permitted for use with taharais until you have herav shemesh, until after the tefillah it becomes nightfall. But in this case, if it's a tumah d'Rabbanan, since it's only a tumah d'Rabbanan, they were not geyser that you require to have herav shemesh. So therefore, the Mishnah says, if this parech shenitum v'lad tumah became tamim with a vlad tumah matbilin reisa bifnim, they would allow you to be taiva with the mikveh that was in the azara, because it's not a tumah d'oraisa. If it would be a tumah d'oraisa, you'd have to take it out. It can't be allowed to be in the azara, the Beis Hamikdash. But here, they can be taiva in the azara. Machnitz reisa miyad. And if the tefillah was done outside, we allow you to bring it in right away. If it was done inside, and you don't have to take it out. If it was done outside, you can bring it in right away, and you didn't need herav shemesh. You don't need herav shemesh for this because it's a tumah d'Rabbanan. But if it became tummy with an avat tumah, so it has a tumah d'oraisa, so it has to be removed from the azara and can't be brought into the azara, and you need herav shemesh. So in that case, it would have to be, the tefillah would have to be in the mikveh that's outside the azara. And then they would come and spread it out in the chel with the area that surrounds the azara. But it would not be allowed to be brought into the azara. It was spread out on the chel, because in this case, where the tumah was an avat tumah, it needs herav shemesh before you can bring it in. However, if this was a new parayches, the Rabbanan were geyser on a new parayches that you had to be taivel before the use. So if it was a new parayches, what did they do? They would spread it out on the roof of the portico. And the harabais, they had benches for people to sit on. They had an awning, a roof that protected them from the sun. They would spread this parayches on the gag of the itztaba, on the roof of the portico, that the people see how beautiful the handiwork, how beautiful it is, this new paroiches that would be spread out over there for the public to see. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Rav Shimon ben Askan, he says the paroichet, what was the thickness of the paroiches? This paroiches over here, there's a machlekes rishonim exactly which paroiches we're talking about. Is it at the entrance to the ulam or at the entrance to the heichal? This parech was oivia tefach, and a thickness of a tefach. It was so thick. Al shimushtayim nimim nareges, and it was woven on 72 heddle shafts. What's the heddle shaft? When you have the loom, and so the thread is passed through a ring, and by that way they were able to alternate the height of the threads and the threads of the chassis and pass the erev between them, and that's how the weaving would go between the threads up and down through the threads. So there was 72 of this, meaning that the paraychas had 72 layers of the woven threads. There was 72 layers, that had the thickness of a tefach, and it had 72 layers of the threads. So there were 72 layers, al kol nima esrim v'arba chutin, and each thread was comprised of 24 strands. We'll see in the Gemara, will explain in more detail, but each one had 24 strands in it. The length of this paraychas was 40 amas, v'rachba esrim, and it had a width of 20, so it was 20 by 40 amas. And it was made up, and the cost of it was 20,800 gold dinars. 20,800 gold dinars was the cost. It was so expensive. And they would make 2 every year. And it would take 300 kohanim to be toivelet. It was so heavy that it would take 300 kohanim to lift it up and be toivelet in the mikveh. Zok the Gemara, the Mishnah said that the threads were comprised of 24 strands. How do we know that that's the case? So the Gemara says, the Torah, had it said chud, meaning the Torah says, Vasisa parechus tchelas v'aragoman v'terla shani v'sheish mosa. The Torah says that you make the parechus from these 3 types of the wool, and you have also linen, sheish, moshe, twisted linen. So you have the turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, the red wool, those 3 types of the wool, and you have twisted and linen. So now these are twisted. What does twisted mean? Twisted means that you take threads, different threads, and you combine them and you twist them. So now if each thread was supposed to be from one strand, it would have said chut. It would have said one. So ilu amar chut echad, that would imply one strand. Kafel, if it is said kafel doubled, that would imply kafel l'shnayim. It would mean folded into two. Shazor, if it said shazor, that twisted, that would mean three. But it says moshzar, which is a doubling of shazor, so that implies therefore 6. So each thread is comprised of 6 strands. You have arba, 4 types. The wool, 3 types of wool and linen. So you have 6 times the 4, mikan ho'esrim v'arba. That's how you learn out that each thread has 24 strands. Tana Brisa learned it differently. Shloshim v'shnayim, 32 strands. How is that? Similar process, but somewhat different. Ilu omar chut, if it said 1, that would be echad. Kafu, it means double, that's the 2. Shazor means not adding 1, you would double the 2, so from 2, that would imply 4. Mashzar would imply taking the 4 and doubling, Mashzar l'shmona, 8. And if you have arba, you have the 4 minim, the 4 types, 4 times 8 is 32. Mikan hatlosen, a train is 32. Tana arba arboim u'shmeina. In another brayso learned that each thread was comprised of 48 strands. Similar process, but ilu amar chut, it would be echad, imply 1. Kofel means double to 2. Kliya. Now the next step would be braided. If it meant to be the next step, it should be braided, which is l'shleishim. That would mean 3. Shazor is now, it would mean twisted. That would mean doubling the 3, it means the 6. Mashzar, which means doubling the 6, l'shnei masha, 12. Arba, and you have the 4 minim, then 4 times 12, mikan ha'arbaim utamne. That means a total that would imply, therefore, a total of 48 strands. Each thread, 48 strands.